All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to talk to you today, Thursday, June 6th. And yeah, starting an hour later than I would prefer, but there's just too many stories, too many important issues, I think, to hash out, to discuss, and may even go over an hour. I try to keep the program to an hour, but I'll break it up into segments after the fact. Hope to hear from you. It was great to get a call yesterday from Stephanie. Stephanie, thank you so much if you're watching now live for checking in. It really, really, really makes the show better, and I appreciate it so much because we've got a dialogue. We've got to have a conversation. Can't just be me talking to, the emptiness. It's got to be, I believe, a dialogue if we're going to solve the serious, very serious problems that we face. Again, 240-283, sorry, that's my home number, 240-242, I got to get that right, 5646. And yeah, I can laugh a little bit. I know the topics are they're serious, they're sad, they're upsetting. I've said I think we've lost our way as a nation, and the most obvious, the most salient example, I think, is our support for the Israeli genocide of Gaza. Let's start there. I do really, really center people who are victims, who are suffering, especially of American imperialism or just American rampant, rapacious capitalism. So, folks like those suffering in Palestine, East Palestine, Ohio would meet that definition. Right now, I don't think there's any place in the world where the people are more at risk and are suffering more unjustly, unfairly, more terribly than in Gaza. Here is the report from the BBC this morning.
The Israel Defense Forces say it carried out a deadly airstrike early on Thursday on a UN school in the central part of the Strip. They say it housed a Hamas compound. The Hamas-run media office says at least 27 people were killed and dozens who were sheltering there were injured. Well,
right, so you can see the children bodies being carried out. The initial count was 27, and as we know, and thank you, Fox News, for pointing this out, we don't always get an accurate number when, at the beginning of the reportage of a particular atrocity, a particular event. Lots of times the numbers of dead have to be counted, and they may not be readily apparent. So the initial report, I guess, from the ministry in Gaza was 27, and now it's been up to 40. And there you can see some destruction there. This image from Al Jazeera, doing tremendous work, outstanding work. I just can't. Again, it just is so upsetting to me. And I think what bothers me also, and maybe this bothers you, maybe not. You can join me if you want to discuss it. But the fact that it seems that so many of us aren't as upset or don't hold Israel, there may be, I feel bad for them, but it's Hamas's fault. No, it's not Hamas's fault. Israel dropped the bombs. Israel attacked a United Nations-linked school where they've told, again, this is supposed to be a safe space, right? A refuge from the killing. And the number, again, initially reported, and again, you hear often that the Ministry of Health isn't reliable, right? That's what, they're Hamas, you can't trust them. Over and over, their numbers are found to be accurate, conservative. They don't overstate. So the initial report, 27. And then as more bodies are found, more bodies counted, discovered, they up the dead now to at least 40. 70 more casualties, and 14 women and children, and 9 women as well. Definitely confirmed. That happened this morning. New York Times covering it. And I actually have to say, for the New York Times, they did a better job than they normally do. So I give them a little, they definitely provided some real pathos, as they should, for what happened, for what Israel is doing with the U.S. support. And so I show you this. I did correct their headline a little bit. They do like that passive voice. When it's Israel committing atrocities, the Times really likes to use that passive voice and attribute the dead, the wounded, the killed, the murdered to just some sort of passive group that we don't really know. So I did correct it. There it is. Gazans weep and pray over loved ones killed in attack on former school. That's the way the New York Times characterizes it in their headlines. Of course, I corrected that to be, no, it's killed by Israelis with U.S. weapons in attack on former school. And even in the sort of subheadline, they say, Gazans say that each place they flee eventually gets caught up in the bloodshed. No, again, it's sort of like, well, these things happen in war, right? That's sort of how they're trying to spin it, the Times. You should know this. You need to be, fully understanding how the New York Times subtly and not so subtly tries to minimize, diminish, reduce the impact of the Israeli atrocities, the genocide, the murders by Israel. And that's very, very upsetting to me. It also upsets me that many people seem to have trouble understanding that the Times engages in manipulation. I think they might even acknowledge it, but then there's well, everyone does that. Okay, well, maybe we all do, but if this is your news source, then you need to understand how they're trying to reduce the impact of the horrors committed by Israel. But again, I don't want to be too hard on them, because after all, look at this. And I just did that subscribe again just one more time. Yeah, please do subscribe to Halitics. Keep seeing those numbers trickle up, keep going up a little bit. And that's that's certainly, makes me feel good. It's gratifying is the word I was looking for. I think I am getting older. I am getting older, but I wonder if I'm getting, I'm starting to have trouble remembering certain words. I hope that's not a symptom of something serious. This is very, very painful to read. So I give and it should be painful to read about an advanced nation dropping bombs on a school where children are sheltering. A mother begs her dead child to take her hand. That's what we're doing. That's what we're responsible for. I just want to be clear about one thing. I always try to be as accurate as I can be. So I put in that New York Times headline. We'll go back to that. Killed by Israel. Well, we know they were killed by Israelis. Killed by Israelis with U.S. weapons. I can't state that I read or that it was confirmed for me that it was U.S. weapons, but we know that U.S. bombs have been confirmed to be the cause of many atrocities. This was a bombing. So, all signs would point to it being the United States that supplied the killing machine, the killing weapon. All right, 240-242-5646. I always center, now I center the Palestinian people, the people of Gaza specifically, in most cases. And this is going to just be a very closely related story. As much as I do that, elites in this country are doing their best, their hardest, their utmost to distract you from what's happening. Specifically, how Israel is massacring, eradicating the people of Gaza. So one of our most august, most highly reputed institutions, the Columbia Law School, with its most prestigious journal, the Columbia Law Review. Now, this is like one of a handful of the most respected, most honored legal publications in the country. Columbia's top 3, top 5, I mean, count. It's right there at the very top of the law school pantheon. And they don't want to tell you about the legal crime that underlies, that was there at the beginning. That's the, the origination story of Israel, the Nakba. And a Palestinian scholar, highly reputed, wrote a law review article for the Harvard Law Journal. That was spiked, that the editors there said, we're not going to publish it. Where he set out, this scholar set out the legal argument that the Nakba, that is the original creation of the state of Israel, including the pushing out, the Nakba, the pushing out, the expulsion of hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from what became and what was the state of Israel, was in fact a crime. It's not, he doesn't say it's genocide, he doesn't say it's apartheid, but he puts it in that category. Harvard said, we're not going to publish that. We've got all these very, very powerful, powerful, wealthy donors, alumni who won't want that in the Harvard Law Journal. So we're not going to publish it. Columbia Law Review editors, to their credit, said, well, wait a second, this is ridiculous. If Harvard doesn't want it, we'll take it. And they didn't just verbatim publish what Harvard refused, but worked for, I think, over a year. If you read this article from The Intercept, he did an amazing job with a scholar. And they did, in fact, publish it. They posted it at the Columbia Law Review website. And the trustees pulled it within 24 hours. They said, we're not going to let that. People don't get to see that. This is how our institutions behave, our elites. They circle the wagons. They protect each other. I guess Obama went to Harvard Law School. He was the president of the Law Review there. I don't know why I was thinking Columbia, but was he ever at Columbia? Maybe not. I'm not sure. But the Harvard Law Review said, we're not going to publish the scholar. And now the Columbia Law Review did publish him, and the university, the board of trustees of the review, which really is the university in the end, said, we're not going to let that stand. No. So over and over we see how a small group of very rich, very powerful, very celebrated people try to keep us in the dark, try to perpetuate their own influence, their own control, their stranglehold, really over the entire planet. It's as bad as it can be. It's just as bad as it can be. I mean, I guess that's not fair. It could always be worse, right? It could be raining, right? Remember this? There's a scene in Stripes, I think, where they're marching and it's awful. And one of the recruits says, could be worse. And they look at him and he says, it could be raining. And then it starts to rain. So yes, it could be worse. We could all be in concentration camps. I could be arrested for if I say this, and I probably wouldn't say it. I'd probably be honest, I'd be a coward and I wouldn't do it. It's pretty hard to imagine things being much worse in Gaza. And we're supporting that. Again, we've lost our way as a nation. I did not promote today's live stream, today's Halitics, as one which was going to focus largely on the people of Palestine, and it will not be. I'm going to talk about another place, another area where we can really see, another topic where we really see how America's lost its way. And this is our hyper-partisan political system and the response, the embarrassing response to Dr. Fauci's recent testimony over the past few days. And so we'll go to one of my, least favorite Dems, the Dem I love to hate. There he is, Jamie Raskin. And this was an opportunity. I'm going to play a video. I have a couple of segments of it, but I'll play a video. This was an opportunity for the Democrats, I think, to really try to explore, by the way, my head being slightly cut off, I apologize for that, to really explore how the COVID vaccine emerged from China, what was its etiology, why was there an initial conclusion that was presented as basically the consensus view that the virus was zoonotic. I think I used that word correctly, I hope, in origin, that it emerged from the bat population. Why was that the initial, or very quickly became the view? And we now know, of course, that almost, we can say with a high degree of confidence, I'm not going to say with certainty, but we can certainly state with a high degree of confidence that it was likely to be a lab leak, right? That it was created, it's a human-made virus, right? That's what we pretty much can be confident of at this point. So how did the scientists get this so wrong? Why was it presented the way it was? And how do we prevent future pandemics? It seems to me that should be the focus of this hearing. And to be fair to the Democrats, neither side seems interested in really protecting the public health. The Republicans are all about demonizing Fauci. I'm not going to focus on them because I have no illusions, and I don't think you do. I don't think there's really any legitimate doubt that the Republicans are not on your side. But the Democrats leave you on your own too. They're just all about grandstanding, attacking Republicans, insulting Republicans, making them the butt of jokes, rather than, again, some kind of exploration of facts, evidence, trying to glean some kind of lessons from mistakes and avoiding them. And this is not obviously something that Democrats, including proclaimed, progressives, people who claim, run democracy summers, they're not doing it for you either. They're not on your side either. Here's Raskin. Okay, let me get that
big lie, claiming absurdly that Trump won the 2020 election, which he lost by more than 7 million votes.
Raskin starts his little intro here focusing on how Trump lied after the 2020 election. It's really got nothing to do with Fauci. I don't know why you're bringing that up. It's really not pertinent to this conversation, as far as I can tell, which is the origins of the coronavirus pandemic. But hey, why not? If you got an opportunity, if there's a camera on you, you might as well go attack Republicans. Right, Jamie?
Now bring you the medical big lie, making the outlandish claim that Dr. Fauci was responsible for causing COVID-19.
So he's saying that's just a lie. That Fauci can't have any, there's no responsibility. And I don't think the Republicans exactly said Fauci is responsible for it. He caused it. I don't think that's quite where they were going with this. But Raskin is dismissing even a scintilla of possibility that maybe Fauci also bears some blame for what happened. And we'll hear later Raskin attack Trump and blame Trump for everything that went wrong. But nothing that Fauci could have possibly done is reproachful. He is an American hero, according to Jamie Raskin. And let's hear from Raskin in his own words.
Using the select subcommittee as a platform for this disinformation, House Republicans now find themselves in the familiar position where their own investigation debunks their runaway political rhetoric. Just like the broader committee's impeachment drive proved only that there were no presidential crimes, much less high crimes and misdemeanors attributable to Joe Biden.
So again, this is where I just lose it. I mean, I feel so clearly we've lost our way. This guy, he's a constitutional law professor. He's presented as one of the best and brightest in the Democratic Party. And he's turning what should be, and I'm not, again, this is not a defense of Republicans. Some people seem to feel like, well, if you criticize the Democrats, you must love the Republicans. No. I expected more from Jamie Raskin. I voted for Jamie Raskin. I said, hey, this guy, Harvard Law, constitutional professor at AU, campaigning on Medicare for all, endorsed Bernie Sanders. I expected when you were in office, you would use your power, your influence to really try to address the serious problems that we face as a nation, including a global pandemic. How did it happen? Is there some sort of sinister connection, interlocking between government, the National Institute of Health, the National Allergy and Infectious Disease section, whatever you want to call it, of the NIH run by Fauci, the National Allergy and Infectious Disease Division? Is there some connection between them and for-profit healthcare? That's what I was hoping for. Not just rank, ugly partisanship.
The investigation of Dr. Fauci shows he is an honorable public servant who has devoted his entire career to the public health and the public interest, and he is not a comic book supervillain.
All right, so Raskin, obviously, creating this straw person. He's no comic book supervillain. He's devoted his entire career to the public health. He's clearly, completely running interference for this guy. And Raskin there is betraying this. And my show today really isn't all about attacking Fauci. That's really not my point. My point is that our government isn't on our side. Our leaders, even those many of you may like, you see them on CNN and they say mean things about Republicans, you're like, go get him, Jamie. Go get him, Adam. And you miss the underlying reality, which is they're not doing this for you. They're doing it to distract you from their failings. They're doing it so that you'll vote for them, even though they're not fighting for you in any way. So what really, should have been explored by Jamie Raskin, and also we'll see from Kathy Castor, who's another Democrat from Florida. Well, the Nation did an incredible exploration of this about a little over a year ago. And we can see how NIH failed to determine what was the cause of the pandemic. We now know with pretty close to certainty. We can state with let's say it this way, with a high degree of confidence, the pandemic started. I'm going to say, take out that probably started in the lab. And Dr. Chan, and I went through this, so I'm not going to go through it again. I went through it on my Tuesday program a couple days ago. But Dr. Chan is very, very clear, very, very specific. This is in the New York Times, which was one of the major sources for the claim that there's nothing to the lab leak hypothesis, that it's been ruled out, that scientists have dismissed it. So the New York Times now has had to do a complete volte-face and say, no, it was a lab leak. Jamie Raskin is totally uninterested in how the NIH, NAID, under Dr. Fauci, got it so wrong. He just doesn't care. But you should care. Because by failing to do diligence, by failing to explore, by failing to talk to the person at the top and holding his feet to the fire, Fauci doesn't deserve he's not entitled to deference. He's a highly decorated, affluent, powerful public servant who ultimately failed. He failed us. He failed to uncover. I'm not saying he failed us because he's responsible for the virus, but there's reason to be suspicious of his involvement and of our involvement as a nation in its ideology. Jamie Raskin couldn't care less. And it's the only reason the only reason for that I can come up with is pure partisanship. This is a Republican-led investigation. Trump, at the beginning, said, maybe it was a lab leak. Yeah, maybe it was the Chinese. And if Trump says it's raining, then you ain't bringing a raincoat with you. That's the basic way it works in this country. If you're a Democrat and Trump says it's raining, then you don't wear a raincoat, period. So I'm thinking, is that the reason Raskin is so protective of Fauci? Is that the reason? Is that the reason Representative Kathy Castor runs interference? Democrat from Florida, Castor, runs interference for Fauci because he said it wasn't a lab leak and Trump said it was. And Fauci made Trump look bad. When the Trump administration, as you can see here, this is, what is this, Politico? Yeah, Politico, by the way, this is a very pro-Fauci piece. This came out in 21 after Trump was out of office. And it's written in a way to make Trump look really bad and Fauci look really good. Senior Trump administration officials decided to strongly imply, they didn't know, who are they to say it was a lab leak? And in fact, says Politico, the conclusive evidence didn't support that hypothesis. So these are just a bunch of ignoramuses from the Trump, leftover holdovers from Trump that are dumbasses that we shouldn't trust, right? Turns out they were right. They got it right. For whatever reason, it was a lab leak. Trump was right early on. Fauci was wrong. And I think this may inform, I don't know this may well inform why Raskin and Castor and the others insist on the heroism of a guy who failed us. Let me play a little bit more from that hearing. This will be Castor, and then I'll go detail. Why did he fail us? Again, I'm not accusing Fauci of being, of creating the virus. I'm saying he prevent it. He stood in the way of an accurate accounting for its origins, and thereby made it much, much, much more likely another pandemic that would kill millions of people would happen.
The outset to bring light to difficult matters, and I think unfortunately this select committee has brought more heat than light to things. And one example is nearly 5 months ago, Dr. Fauci sat for a 14-hour voluntary interview with the subcommittee. I was there for that interview, which included exchanges on many important questions on research, safety, long COVID, vaccine development, and the importance of strong public health systems in our local communities. Also, we discussed pandemic preparedness, like stockpiling supplies for our hospitals in advance of the next pandemic.
Right, so that's all good. I mean, that's fine. Yes, those are the things you should talk about with the former NAID director. But this is about COVID. I don't know why you're not exploring what he now believes caused COVID, where it came from in his view. Why was, these are the questions you need to ask, because another global pandemic could easily ensue. We want to prevent it. If it came from a lab, well, why? What was going on in that lab? What was done in that lab that shouldn't have been done? How were the precautions that should have been taken not? Was someone making money from this lab? Was there contributions by for-profit corporations that expected something in return and didn't want to spend more, wanted to keep expenses low, even if it meant that the chance of a leak of a deadly global pandemic was increased? Was the NIH properly overseeing the activities at that lab? Why was that lab chosen? Why did you do research in China, where obviously the opportunities for the U.S. government, for watchdog agencies like yours, Dr. Fauci, were greatly reduced? Why did this happen? And no one's asking that question. Not one Democrat asked him that question.
But I want the public to know that for 5 months, the Republicans sat on that transcript. They could have released it at any time. It was released last Friday. If the public had seen it 5 months ago, they would know that the Republicans failed to find a shred of evidence of their far-fetched conspiracy linking Dr. Fauci to a cover-up of the origins of the pandemic.
All right, so again, just pure make-weight argument, statements, bald statements that in fact are not accurate. I'm not going to get into what the Republicans found or didn't find. They're grandstanding too. Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever. They're not on your side either. But the evidence that Fauci prevented the truth from coming out is not speculative. It's not a conspiracy. So again, let's go back, or let's return to that article in The Nation from a year ago, where they look into very closely the origins of COVID and the origins of the conclusion by Dr. Fauci and others that it was not a lab leak. So I just highlight a few things. I'm not going to go through it. It's very dense, but you can look this up in The Nation. What was the origin of this virus that killed millions? And the definitive statement that came out in 2020, shortly after, this is March of 2020, remember? So the virus was that was the COVID year, and it was just beginning, we were just beginning to see the shutdowns and the mask mandates and the like at that point. So it was a very important time, right? And the kind of definitive article in the early days of COVID came out in Nature Medicine, which concluded the SARS-CoV-2 clearly is not a lab construct or a purposefully manipulated construct. That's what these scientists said. And they added that it was a natural origin. The virus likely spilled from bats into humans. So we know now that's false. We know now it started in a lab. And again, there it is. The pandemic probably started in a lab. Almost definitely, actually, started in a lab. So the question that should be asked, should have been asked, wasn't asked, Fauci, well, how did that article come about? Because he was very involved in it. He was talking to the writers. I don't think his name is not on it. But before it came out, that article, there was a meeting of the minds. And obviously Fauci's one of the top minds when it comes to infectious diseases. I mean, he's the top, right? He's the director. He's the director of the National Allergy and Infectious Diseases branch or division of NIH. So who else are you going to call besides Ghostbusters? You're going to call Dr. Fauci. And he didn't even know exactly what NIH was funding at that time. He had to go look it up. What was our involvement? What's going on? I know there's something in Wuhan. The virus apparently was first observed in Wuhan. We've got something going on in Wuhan. What are we doing in Wuhan? And it turns out that NIH, his agency, his branch of the government, was funding this group called EcoHealth Alliance, which through the EcoHealth Alliance, NIH was funneling money to the Wuhan Institute, where experiments were being conducted on genetically engineered mice with what they call chimeric hybrids. That's human created, human viruses, gain of function. They might be a virus originally that were taken from bats, right? They take a bat, they find a dead bat, they take samples of its blood and they find the SARS in its blood, and then they play around with that. So it's not totally created in a lab, but they're hybridizing it. These are with genetically engineered mice. So they're not like mice in nature. And they're creating these hybrids with the mice and the bats virus, which was viewed at the time by some as very risky. What Fauci has hung his hat on is, well, I saw this, it wasn't great, but hey, it had nothing to do. Those are not SARS. SARS is from something else. Or rather, COVID is SARS related, but it's not the same. Now, I don't understand all that, but I take their word for it. If the virologists are saying no, those specific experiments with the chimeric hybrids and the genetically engineered mice were not the source, I buy it. But as the Nation points out, yeah, but what else were they doing there? What other experiments were happening? We don't know. And to the extent that we know, it was only because The Intercept and The Nation and other journalists filed lawsuits. It wasn't just that they made FOIA requests. They actually had to file lawsuits and get the court to order the release of those documents. So Fauci was not releasing. He was not transparent. He was not telling us this is what was going on in Wuhan, where the virus was first observed. And when doctors and other scientists, virologists said, well, wait a second. This doesn't really look kosher, right? It doesn't look like we look at that virus under a microscope, doesn't look like natural. It looks like maybe there's some cleavages, right? I don't know. It's human. I don't understand all that personally. But a lot of very smart people who do understand it said, no, wait, this could well have been human created or human engineered. Or maybe it was originally from a bat, but it was subjected to various gains of function, making it more likely to spread. And instead of that coming out, instead of that being discussed, we got this paper in March that said, no, it just came from a bat. Why? I would ask Fauci. Okay, you say you didn't put any pressure on the authors, even though it kind of looks like you kind of did. And they say you did, but we can't really prove it. This Dr. Relman from Stanford, and folks should know, and I think you do know, I don't dismiss expertise. I don't feel like if you went to like a really top school and you got great grades, like I'm like impressed. I'm like, okay, you get brownie points for that and that. I'm going to be more likely to believe you're probably correct and you know what you're talking about. But doesn't mean I'm going to defer to you. I'm going to say, oh, you're right and I'm wrong. I'll do a little more exploration, but I'm going to be more inclined to believe you. Unless I have reason to think you're getting paid off, you're corrupt, you've been wrong before. So this guy, Dr. Relman from Stanford, he's a professor there, sounds pretty impressive to me. And he's saying that the paper that Fauci adopted as the lodestars, the North Star for COVID, that was in Nature magazine. It was not Nature, but this different Nature something. Rests on flawed assumptions and opinion and doesn't fairly contend with the possibility of a lab-associated origin, which he believes is as plausible as a natural origin. Well, these doctors are very conservative. Oh, it says probable. Now we know it was what happened. It came from the lab that was getting funding from the NIH, which Dr. Fauci was one of the heads of, and specifically the division of the NIH NAID that Fauci headed, was helping fund experiments that included gain of function with respect to the SARS, the broad category of SARS viruses. So we know all that now. How come you're not asking him those questions? Why aren't you asking him about that RASKIN? Why aren't you asking him about that Kathy CASTOR? Don't you want to prevent this from happening again? What were the mistakes that were made in the funding process that led to the Wuhan lab getting that money in the first place? How do we avoid making them? What kind of diligence do we need to practice in the future? Should we never do or never fund experiments in China? Are there some countries that we can have more faith that we could help sponsor their research? China's been incredibly opaque since this happened. They did everything possible to keep us from learning what happened. Is that something we should have known in advance could happen if something went terribly wrong in that lab? Should we have known that China probably wouldn't be very helpful, Dr. Fauci? I mean, why aren't those questions being asked? I'm not just playing around. We're talking about millions and millions of lives lost. So just a little more from Dr. Relman explaining why he's skeptical of the process that led to that article in Nature Science, I think it's called, Nature Science magazine, the lodestar, the one that defined, that determined with, conclusively incorrectly, that this was a naturally occurring virus. So Dr. Relman says when I first read the paper, I had problems with it. It's not like I read it and said, oh, this answers. I was like, well, what's the matter with this? And the writers who were working with Fauci, I thought, well, maybe they just didn't really even consider the possibility of a lab leak. But then he says, no, they did. They considered it. But then they rushed to judgment, and the lab scenarios fell out of favor. So I would ask Fauci, hey, do you know why the lab hypothesis fell out of favor? Do you know why after a lot, there was a lot of discussion, detailed conversations about the potential for a lab leak having created this virus that was ravaging the world? Do you know why the finished product didn't even, conclusively rejected that possibility? I would like to know that. So Relman continues to explain that he believed, or it appeared to him when he was reading the article or after he had read it, and he had learned that the scientists, the authors, did consider the lab leak hypothesis, but ultimately rejected it. And he notes, it appears that a combination of a scant amount of data, they didn't have much information, and an unspoken bias diminished the idea in their minds. So what was that bias, Dr. Fauci? Why was there initially a lot of interest in the potential of that a lab leak created it, a possibility, and then that all just went out the window? Why? You say that you didn't pressure anybody. Some of the scientists say that's not really true. But regardless, we wouldn't even be having this conversation if the article had been correct. But it wasn't correct. So, and by the way, I'm just adjusting my shirt here. It wasn't correct. So you were talking to the authors. You were involved in the conversation. Why was it incorrect? Why did you get it so wrong? What did you miss? Those are really important questions. Again, because we learn from our mistakes, right? And it appears, as far as I can tell, that there wasn't any learning. As far as I can tell, I don't know. It doesn't, because you've just been arguing that you didn't do anything wrong. You didn't pressure anybody. But you did talk to Dr. Anderson. Yeah, these are the authors: Anderson, Rambow, Lipkin, Holmes, and Gary. And you were in conversation with them. And at least Anderson took seriously initially the idea that this was a lab leak. And then he stopped. He was inclined, I think his initial correspondence, he was inclined to believe it was zoonotic. But then he was like, wait a sec, some of this looks a little bit like it could have been lab created. And then he talked to you and he stopped saying that. Why didn't Jamie Raskin ask him that question? And is it just because he hates Trump? It's a personal investment against Trump. Trump did say, and look, Trump got an awful lot wrong. Remember, he put people on planes. I'm not defending Trump. He took people from China. He said, oh yeah, bring them in. Which was a terrible mistake. But Trump was right when he said it's probably a lab leak. And is that why, Raskin, you're so dead set on defending Fauci? Because I don't understand it otherwise. Maybe we can go back and just play a little more from Raskin, and then we're going to move on to my final topic. I've got a little bit more time. By the way, I have not heard from you. 240-242-5646. Just want to make sure about that. Final topic is going to be 2024 election. I told you Tuesday, I believe it was Tuesday, You can vote for Jill Stein without any worries, without any fear that you might be throwing the election to Trump because Trump's done, sick of forking him, it's over. Got a little more data since I did that program, specifically information from the New Mexico and New Jersey primaries that were on Tuesday, held Tuesday. The results, I guess, published yesterday. So we'll talk a little bit about that in just a moment. But let me get to this final 35 seconds or so of Raskin grandstanding some more in Congress.
Thank you, Dr. Ruiz. Public health is a matter of urgent and comprehensive public concern. Under Donald Trump, when the COVID-19 pandemic began and spun out of control, we came close to becoming a failed state, which the political scientists define as a state that cannot deliver the basic goods of existence to its people.
Well, I just want to stop that. We're close to that now, aren't we, Raskin? So many Americans don't have health care. We're not protected. We cannot address a lot of the terrible challenges Americans are facing as a result of the climate catastrophe. So it's far from clear to me that your not unfair characterization of the situation in the early months of COVID when Trump was president, it's not clear to me that things have changed very much. But it's obvious what you're trying to do. Everything is Donald Trump's fault. Everything is the Republicans' fault. Democrats bear no responsibility, no blame for anything. And if somebody like a Dr. Fauci took on Donald Trump, then de facto Fauci's right. That's the Raskin position. And I posit to you that's not statesmanlike, that's not statesperson-like, that's petulant, that's destructive, that is anti-democratic, and we need a different direction.
According to Dr. Deborah Birx, Donald Trump's own COVID-19 advisor, America unnecessarily lost hundreds of thousands of people because of the recklessness and indifference of Donald Trump and his administration.
All right, so there it is. I didn't show you the video, but you heard it. That's the position of the Democratic Party as, set forth by Jamie Raskin. And it's a terrible disservice. He's putting party above everything. He's putting, I guess, political ambition above everything. The truth doesn't matter. And I'm, very upset about that. Very disappointed, very disheartened. And I'm also sorry that a lot of people that I often see eye to eye with politically don't recognize, apparently, just how destructive this kind of politics by Raskin is. To be fair to Trump, the NIH, there it is, cancels funding for bat coronavirus research project in 2020 when Trump was president. They did the right thing. We shouldn't have been doing that research. Maybe by stopping the funding, Trump was preventing another pandemic. Now, again, I'm not going to give Trump a whole lot of credit. I think it was a very slow response to the pandemic. Our death numbers were higher than in other countries, probably for part of that reason. We didn't carry out quarantining well at all effectively. There were a variety of different, I'm not an expert, but from what I understand, that we had a slow response and people didn't take it seriously. And there are a lot of problems that have been pointed out with the vaccines, but even so, the vaccines did save lives, especially seniors, not so much young people, but at least the seniors benefited from the vaccines. And there was a slow rollout. So Trump, didn't handle it well. But he was right about the origins. And I guess Raskin can't bear that. Of course, during the Biden administration, NIH said, oh, no, we're going to go back to EcoHealth, the ones that funded the gain of function research that may well have been the source of that virus. Certainly the leak came from a lab where they were performing that research. So apparently we learned nothing, at least as of May 8, 23, we learned nothing. Ultimately, and it's really actually almost you have to laugh. For all the mocking, all the attacks on Trump by the Democrats, and all the insistence that he doesn't know anything, he doesn't know what he's doing, the decision to reinstate funding for EcoHealth, despite all of that, you kind of have to laugh. That was in 23 that it was reinstated. But in the wake of, or in advance of, maybe a different way to put it, in advance of these hearings, May 16th, just a few weeks ago, guess what? No more funding for EcoHealth. Department of Health Human Services announced last month suspended funding. Gee, maybe they were you think maybe they were just a little bit afraid of what might come out in these hearings? I'm going to say yeah. I don't, look, I'm not voting for either one of them. I'm not voting for either president running for re-election. It's not going to happen. What we're doing in Gaza, our support for Israel's genocide there makes Biden unacceptable to me, period. I will not vote for that. I will not be part of that. I will not feel any complicity. I'm not going to vote for Trump. So many ways. Trump could be, his rhetoric is even worse on Israel. And there's other areas where Trump is terrible too, of course. So I'm not voting for either one. Just trying to set the record straight. I don't think Trump is going to win. I was very, very clear about this on Tuesday. I thought that focus group that the New York Times convened with Frank Luntz made it clear. He ain't winning. Newsweek has a really interesting kind of series. Well, I won't say series. Three articles that came out where they talk about whether Trump, and they use the term, I like it, is Trump, well, they say he's toast. He's toast if primary voters keep abandoning him. At least that's the word from a guy named Mike Madrid. I think I've seen Madrid on CNN. He's called a GOP strategist. I don't know. How do you get to be a GOP strategist? How do you get to be a Democratic strategist? Just call yourself that? Do you have to go to school and get a degree in strategizing or whatever it is? Strategizing? I don't know. But whatever Madrid is, presumably he is a GOP strategist. He laid down a marker for Trump in the primaries. He said Trump needs, let's just get this right up so you can see it. He needs 90% of the vote. This is June 3rd, the primary is June 4th. If he can't get 90% of the vote, he's likely toast. It may not sound like much, but that kind of hemorrhaging isn't unprecedented. And it isn't unprecedented to some people, but you got to go back pretty deep to get to those numbers. So guess what? At least if Madrid is right, I'm looking at Trump in Wisconsin, or not Wisconsin, New Mexico. Wisconsin? What the hell was I thinking? Looking at him in New Mexico, and I'm like, I guess he's toast. Right? I mean, he must be toast, because if you look at that, I mean, he suffered a huge vote against him. So I looked at those. I mean, huge is obviously a relative term. Is it huge? I don't know if I quite call it huge. But it wasn't what he wanted, at least according to Mike Madrid. It couldn't be what he wanted, according to Madrid, because Madrid said you can't lose more than 10%, right? And there you go. Trump got 84.5%, which to my math means he lost 15.5%. He lost more than 50% more than he was told by Madrid he couldn't lose, or he's toast. The problem with that analysis, and by the way, I wanted to adopt it, not because I really care if Trump wins or I don't, right? I mean, assuming it's the binary world, it's either Trump or Biden, I don't care. It just doesn't matter to me. But, you know, my argument is Trump's going to lose, so therefore you can vote for Jill Stein without any, and I wouldn't have any compunction. I don't care if voting for Jill Stein helps Trump. That doesn't matter to me because I don't care whether it's Trump or Biden. They're both equally bad, in my opinion, or they're both so bad that the difference isn't meaningful enough for me to care, to sweat it. I can't. That's my view. So I want you to vote. I really do. I want you to vote for Jill Stein. I want her to get a lot of votes. That's important to me. And when I saw this number, oh, well, he's toast. Mike Madrid just said he's toast if he can't get 90% of the vote in New Mexico, and he only got 84.5%, so he's toast. But there's a problem with that argument because the other president running for president only got 83.9%. So he didn't even get, he got less than Trump. Neither one got to 90%. And according to Madrid, you got to go back far. The problem with these strategists is that they're just giving sound bites. They're just tweeting, hoping to get lots of shares and lots of likes and retweets. So really, you look at those numbers from New Mexico and you can't conclude anything. I'll conclude this. The vast majority of voters in both parties is it the Lobo State? Is New Mexico the Lobo State? Land of Enchantment? Maybe it's Land of Enchantment. The majority of voters there, the great majority, are fine with the two candidates. A few aren't. That's as far as I'll go. I can't go beyond that. I can't say, oh yeah, Trump's toast. How could I say he's toast because he doesn't get 90% of the vote in a primary when Biden doesn't even get as many votes as Trump? And going to New Jersey doesn't help much because that was the other primary. In New Jersey, let's see, do I have that right? Let's do Biden first. Trump, there wasn't a primary in New Jersey. Apparently, Trump, I'll call that up. I had a lot of trouble getting GOP numbers. They pretty much called it off because I guess the New Jersey Republican Party didn't even want to do it. I'm not really clear on that. Biden did a little better in Jersey than he did in New Mexico. He got almost 80, he got 88+%, whereas he only got 83.5% in New Mexico. Still didn't get to that 90% magic figure, according to Mike Madrid. Uncommitted didn't even get 9%. Most voters, I hate to say it, it bothers me. This is something that really keeps me up at night, is most voters don't seem to care that much about Gaza. It's awful, but it's not a primary issue for you. And this tells me one more thing. This is why Democrats, or we, progressives, have to be always focused on economic justice, on a better deal for poor, struggling, working class voters. If you, like me, are privileged, you have the luxury of saying, I really feel bad for those children being bombed in Gaza. But if you're like, I could get laid off tomorrow and I could be homeless in a month, right? Some people, that's their life. If I get laid off, I'll be homeless. And I could be laid off. My best friend was laid off. My sister was laid off. I could be laid off. I could be homeless. That's what people think about. That's their lives. They don't have, sadly, many of them don't have the luxury of thinking about much else besides their own circumstances. If we on the left really want to stop genocide and we want to stop ecocide, make sure everybody has enough. Real quick, let's get to the Trump numbers. They do have numbers. So Mike Madrid, I guess, would have to conclude Trump's in good shape over, based on the numbers out of New Jersey. Here he got he got just under 97%. So Madrid says Trump needed 90%. In New Jersey, he got 97%. So with all that, I'm going to tell you, I still think Trump is. I don't think he's going to win. People don't like Joe Biden, but the words of one of those undecided voters in the Frank Luntz focus group keep coming back to me. I'm not voting for a felon, and that is who Donald Trump is right now. He's a felon, and I cannot see, and I firmly, strongly believe he will not be reelected. All right, folks, great chatting with you, great talking with you. Thank you for letting me be part of your day, and I'll be back tomorrow for the free-for-all.